The wind dragged dust through the empty main street, rattling the shutters of the saloon like a warning nobody wanted to hear. Folks leaned on porch rails, silent, watching the scene unravel under the setting sun. Jed stumbled from the saloon first, whiskey dripping off his breath like poison. Behind him came Emma, wrists already red from the rope he'd yanked tight around them. Her face was streaked with dust and tears, but her eyes burned. Not weak, not yet. Jed shoved her hard into the dirt. "Thief," he spat, voice slurred but loud enough for the whole town to hear. "You think you can steal from me and walk away?" Emma's voice cracked. "I didn't take anything." A few heads turned, but nobody stepped forward. Not the storekeep, not the men on the porch with their cards. Even the preacher froze halfway through locking the church doors. Jed kicked sand at her face, rope yanking her wrists up so tight she winced. "Liar, same as your mother, all sweet words till the knife comes out." From the edge of town, a lone rider sat on his horse, Caleb. The rancher's coat was sun-bleached, hat low over his weathered face. He didn't move, didn't speak, just watched, jaw tight, the reins slack in his hands. Jed dragged Emma to her feet, muttering curses under his breath. The rope dug deep as he pulled her toward the canyon road. "Coyotes'll enjoy you tonight," he growled, voice carrying like gunshot through the cooling air. "Stop!" Emma twisted, heels digging furrows in the dirt. "Please, don't do this." Jed slapped her so hard her head snapped sideways. The sound cracked across the street like a whip. Someone gasped. Nobody helped. Caleb's hand slid slowly to the rifle scabbard at his saddle. He didn't draw. Not yet. The sun spilled blood red across the rooftops as Jed disappeared down the road with Emma stumbling behind him. The town stayed frozen, doors creaking shut, windows closing one by one. Caleb's eyes stayed on that canyon trail long after they were gone, the wind tugging at his coat like it knew something was coming. The canyon swallowed the last of the light as Jed shoved Emma against the weathered post, rope twisting around her wrists until her skin burned raw. The smell of dust and sage filled the air, sharp and dry, like everything in this god-forsaken land. "You stay here," Jed muttered, tying the last knot. His voice was low, mean, trembling with the kind of anger that comes from rot deep inside a man's soul. "Coyotes'll take what's left by morning." Emma's chest heaved as she fought the ropes, wood splinters biting into her back. "Jed, please," she whispered, voice breaking. "You don't have to do this." Jed leaned close, eyes glassy, spit flying as he snarled, "You crossed me, girl. Nobody crosses me." He shoved her head back against the post, the thud echoing off the canyon walls. Then he laughed, a hollow, drunken bark, and swung into his saddle. The horse's hooves kicked up sand as he rode off, the sound growing faint until only the wind remained. Emma stood alone, wrists bound high, legs trembling under her. Darkness bled over the cliffs, stars blinking alive one by one like indifferent witnesses. She pulled hard, rope biting deeper, skin tearing. Her breath came sharp, shallow. Each gust of wind carried the smell of distant rain and the faint, haunting howl of coyotes starting their night song. Her voice cracked through the dark. "Somebody, help!" But the canyon threw her words back at her, thin and hopeless. The hours crawled. Her knees buckled. Dust clung to her lashes. The moon slid higher, silver light spilling across her bruised face. She thought of her mother, gone these 2 years, and the promise she'd made at her grave to leave this town, to start fresh somewhere far from Jed's rage. But now, her promise felt low, like a cruel joke. Far off, a shadow moved. A single rider cutting across the open plain, lantern swaying from his saddle horn. Emma blinked hard, not sure if it was real or just another trick of the desert night. But then she heard the hoofbeats, slow, steady. The rancher was coming. The lantern's glow swayed like a lone star in the darkness, growing brighter with every echoing hoofbeat. Caleb rode hard, dust curling off the canyon floor behind him, eyes locked on the girl slumped against the post. Emma lifted her head when the light finally touched her face. Her lips were cracked, voice barely a rasp. "Am I dreaming?" Caleb swung down from the saddle without a word. The knife flashed in his hand as he cut through the rope with one clean pull. The strands fell away, Emma's arms dropping like dead weight before she collapsed forward into his arms. "Easy," he murmured, voice low, steady as bedrock. "You're safe now." She clung to him weakly, breath hitching. "He left me. Said the coyotes." Caleb's jaw tightened. "Not tonight." He lifted her onto his horse, wrapping his coat around her shoulders. The ride back was silent except for the horse's steady rhythm and the faint hiss of wind through the sage. Emma leaned against him, eyes half closed, the cold creeping through her bones while the lantern painted gold across the desert night. At the ranch, the old wooden door groaned open under Caleb's hand. He carried her inside, laying her on a worn blanket near the crackling fireplace. The flames threw warm light over the room, the rifles above the mantel, the Bible on the table, the dust dancing in the air like tiny ghosts. Emma drank from the tin cup he pressed into her shaking hands, water spilling down her chin. "Why? Why? Help me," she whispered. Caleb crouched beside her, eyes steady. "Because somebody had to." Outside, the wind shifted. A faint sound carried through the night, distant hoofbeats again, slow, circling. Emma stiffened. "He'll come back," she said, voice tight. Caleb didn't answer. He rose, checked the rifle by the door, and glanced out the window where the dark pressed close against the glass. "Let him," he said finally, voice like gravel. "This time he won't like what he finds." The fire crackled louder, casting long shadows on the cabin walls, as if the night itself was holding its breath. Before dawn, the ranch lay wrapped in silence, the kind that comes before trouble. A thin fog clung to the ground as Caleb stepped onto the porch, coffee steaming in his hand, eyes scanning the tree line. Then came the hoofbeats. 3 riders pushing through the mist, torches spitting sparks. At their head, Jed sat tall in the saddle, eyes gleaming like a man who'd been drinking hate all night. He yanked his reins, stopping 20 paces from the porch. "Caleb!" His voice cracked across the clearing. "She's coming with me." Inside, Emma froze by the fire, breath shallow. Caleb set his cup down slow, real deliberate, then stepped off the porch with the shotgun resting easy in his arms. His coat shifted in the wind. The man looked carved out of the very hills behind him. "She ain't yours," Caleb said, voice steady, low. "Not anymore." Jed spat into the dirt. "She's mine by blood." His eyes slid toward the cabin door. "Always will be." Emma's whisper trembled from inside. "Don't let him take me." Caleb's gaze never wavered. "You got 2 choices, Jed. Leave, or leave in the ground." One of Jed's drunks shifted in his saddle, hand near his pistol. But Jed raised his palm, stopping him. The torches cracked in the cold air, throwing wild shadows across his face. He grinned, mean, yellow-teethed, the kind that promised worse things later. "This ain't over, rancher." Caleb tilted his head slightly, finger near the trigger. "It'll be over when you say it is." For a long moment, no one moved. The wind carried only the groan of the barn door swaying on its hinges. Then Jed tugged his reins sharp, spit flying as he wheeled his horse around. "Next time," he growled, voice trailing behind him as the 3 riders disappeared into the trees, "you'll wish you'd handed her over." Caleb stayed there in the yard, shotgun cradled, watching the darkness swallow them whole. Inside, Emma hugged the blanket tight, staring at the door like it was the only thing between her and hell itself. The ranch had gone quiet again. Too quiet. By midday, the sun burned harsh over the town, dust curling in lazy spirals down the empty streets. Word had reached Sheriff McCall, and his boots crunched against the dry earth as he rode toward Caleb's ranch, spurs jingling faintly with each step. Caleb met him at the gate, hat low, eyes shaded but alert. The ranch smelled of wood smoke and hope, but tension hung thick as desert heat. "Rancher," the sheriff said, tipping his hat, "I heard about last night. That boy, Jed, dangerous man." "Dangerous?" Caleb's voice was flat, eyes narrowing. "He's a damn menace. He'd see her dead before sunrise if I let him." Inside, Emma sat on the porch steps, knees pulled tight, sunburnt cheeks flushed pink. She glanced at the sheriff, hope flickering in her dark eyes. "I'll handle it," the sheriff said, voice calm but firm. "You tell me what happened, girl." Emma swallowed, hands twisting in her lap. He tied me up. Said the coyotes would finish me if I stayed," she whispered. The words trembled but carried the weight of truth. Sheriff McCall nodded, turning to Caleb. "You're a good man standing in the middle of that. But law's got a pace. Slow sometimes. We'll make sure he can't touch her again." Caleb ran a hand through his graying beard, eyes distant. "Law or not, the bastard's smart. He waits, watches, and when he strikes, someone'll pay." The sheriff looked toward the horizon, squinting against the glaring light. "That's why we'll ride patrol, watch the canyon trail tonight. Nobody gets through, without us knowing." Emma's lips quivered as relief softened her features. "So, I'm safe?" "For now," Caleb muttered, voice rough, eyes scanning the hills behind the ranch. "But he's got fire in him. Don't think for a second this is over." The wind picked up, whistling through the fence posts and rattling the porch boards. In the distance, faint hoofbeats echoed across the plains, a reminder that Jed's shadow still lingered. Caleb's hand brushed the rifle at his side. "We prepare. That's all we can do." Emma pressed herself against the warm wood of the porch railing, letting the sun's heat seep into her bones. For the first time in nights, she allowed herself to believe someone had her back. But out past the edge of the ranch, Jed was already sharpening a knife under the cold, indifferent light of the rising moon. Night fell like a curtain, thick and suffocating, the kind that makes the shadows in the desert feel alive. Flames from the barn's lanterns flickered as Jed and his gang of outlaws crested the ridge, torches blazing, eyes glinting with malice. The wind carried the acrid scent of smoke and the promise of chaos. Emma pressed herself against the cabin wall, knuckles white around the lantern she held. Her heartbeat pounded in her ears, matching the hooves of the approaching gang. "They're here," she whispered, voice trembling. Caleb stepped out onto the porch, shotgun cradled across his chest. Moonlight glinted off the barrel, illuminating the lines etched deep into his weathered face. "Stay behind me," he said, voice low, steady. "I've got this." Jed spat on the ground, grin wide and cruel. "Come out, rancher. Let's see what you're made of." His gang laughed, a harsh, grating sound that echoed against the canyon walls. The first shot rang out, sharp, loud, breaking the tense silence. Caleb's rifle cracked in the night, each flash illuminating the terror on the outlaws' faces. One went down, the torch tumbling from his hand into the dry grass, igniting a small fire. Emma ducked behind the wooden railing, eyes wide, chest heaving. Sparks from the fire reflected in her tear-streaked face as she watched Caleb hold the line, steady and unflinching. "He won't win," she muttered, almost to herself. Jed roared in fury, swinging his pistol. "Get him! Take the girl!" But Caleb's aim was true, each shot forcing the gang back step by step. The air smelled of gunpowder, smoke, and fear. A torch ignited the corner of the barn, flames licking the roof. Caleb fired again, forcing Jed to dive for cover behind the post. Dust and sparks filled the night, the world reduced to firelight and shadow. Emma's hands shook, the lantern swinging dangerously. Caleb's voice cut through the chaos. "Stay down! Don't move!" The gang faltered, hesitation creeping in. Caleb's eyes never left Jed, who snarled like a cornered animal. The wind carried the echoes of hooves, gunfire, and shouted threats, a violent symphony of a town teetering on the edge of ruin. By the time the first hint of dawn crept over the horizon, the outlaws were scattered and Caleb stood firm, bruised but unbroken. Emma finally let herself breathe, clutching the fire-warmed lantern, realizing that tonight survival had a face, and it was his. The first light of dawn painted the desert in shades of gold and blood red. Smoke curled from the burned barn, wisps twisting into the sky like restless spirits. Caleb stood on the porch, rifle cradled, muscles tight, eyes scanning the horizon. Then, from the ridge came the unmistakable sound of hoofbeats, steady, purposeful. Sheriff McCall and 2 deputies emerged, riding hard across the plain, spurs catching the morning sun. Relief and tension mingled in Caleb's chest. The law had finally arrived. Jed froze mid-step, hand hovering over his pistol. His gang faltered, eyes darting between the approaching riders and the rancher standing like stone on the porch. "This ain't over," Jed growled, voice sharp with fear and fury. Caleb lowered his rifle slightly but didn't move. "It's over when the law says it is," he replied, calm but firm. The sheriff kicked his horse into a trot, deputies flanking him. "Drop your weapons," he shouted, voice carrying over the canyon. Dust swirled at their feet. For a tense heartbeat, the world held its breath. Then gunfire erupted, short, precise bursts. 2 of Jed's men hit the ground, cries cut short, their torches sputtering out. Chaos erupted as the remaining outlaws scattered, abandoning their plan, abandoning their fearsome bravado.